All right, so we're diving into SARIMA
Okay.
today. And, this is
This is a big one.
this is a big one, yeah. People hear SARIMA and they're like, yeah, they kind of freak out a little bit. They think
It's a
it's
big, scary acronym.
exactly. It's like, oh, I need a PhD to even understand this.
Right.
It's really not that bad once you break it down.
Oh, no, not at all. Like, think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to, I don't know, predict something.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so say you're a business owner.
Okay, I like that.
Right. And you want to know how much of your product to order for the holidays?
Makes sense.
You've got to figure out, like, are sales going to go through the roof this year?
It's going to be huge.
Exactly. Or are people going to be, like, tightening their belts?
Ooh, tough times.
Yeah, right. So you need a way to look at your past sales data.
Okay.
See if there's any kind of pattern or rhythm to it.
So we're talking about those like recurring trends.
Exactly. And that's where SARIMA comes in.
Okay, so walk me through this. What is SARIMA actually doing?
All right. So SARIMA, it stands for Seasonal Autoregressive Integrated Moving Average.
Catchy, right?
Definitely rolls right off the tongue. But really, each of those words is telling us something about how it works.
Okay, let's break it down then, piece by piece.
Okay, so that S at the beginning, that's for seasonal.
Right, because so much of what we're talking about has to do with these cycles, right?
Exactly. Like, think about how much more ice cream people buy in the summer.
Oh, for sure. Or
How much?
how about those winter coat sales when it starts getting cold?
There you go. It's all about those predictable ups and downs.
So SARIMA is smart enough to recognize those patterns and use them to make predictions.
Exactly. It's like having a crystal ball, but instead of magic, it's using math and data.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Right.
But there's more to it than just the seasonal part, right?
Right.
What about the AR, the autoregressive? What's that all about?
So autoregressive, it sounds complicated, but it basically means that SARIMA is looking back at past data to find clues about the future.
So it's like learning from experience.
Exactly. It's analyzing those past sales figures, those temperature fluctuations, whatever data you feed it, and trying to find relationships.
So it's looking for correlations, like
Yeah, like if we sold a ton of ice cream last July.
chances are July's going to be a big month for ice cream again this year.
It's not always a guarantee.
Right?
But it gives you a much better starting point than just guessing blindly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got the seasonal part, the autoregressive part. What about the I? What does integrated even mean in this context?
So integrated, this one's all about making sure the data we're feeding into SARIMA is behaving itself.
Behaving itself.
Yeah, not too wild and all over the place.
So we're talking about that stationary thing I've heard data scientists mention.
You got it.
What does that actually mean?
Think of it like this picture, a bouncy ball versus a train on tracks.
Okay, I'm visualizing it. Go on.
The ball's movement is all over the place, totally unpredictable. But that train, it's following a set course, right?
Right, more or less.
Exactly. And that's the kind of data SARIMA loves.
So data that's more consistent, less chaotic.
Exactly. The technical term is stationary, but well-behaved works too.
I like it. So we've covered the S, the AR, and the I in SARIMA. What about that MA? What's the deal with moving average? So moving average, that sounds a little less intimidating, right? Kind of like, finding the average of something.
Yeah, it's definitely the least scary sounding part of SARIMA. But it's doing some important work behind the scenes.
All right, so how does it all fit in? What's this moving average actually doing for our forecasting model?
So remember how we were talking about real-world data being messy? Sometimes it's like trying to have a conversation at a rock concert.
Loud and chaotic.
Exactly. The moving average part of SARIMA is like that friend who always stays calm under pressure. It helps smooth things out, filter out some of that noise.
So we're not getting distracted by every little blip in the data.
Precisely. It's like instead of freaking out over every daily fluctuation in the stock market.
You're looking at the overall trend over weeks or months.
Exactly. You're getting a clearer picture of the long-term patterns.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've broken down all the pieces of SARIMA.
We've demystified the acronym.
We have. But how does all of this translate into something, useful? Like, how can I actually use SARIMA to, say, predict my website traffic or something?
Right. So our source actually walks through a really cool example.
Oh, yeah, the Superstore data, right.
Exactly. They use monthly sales data from this global superstore.
Okay, and they're trying to, predict future sales based on that past data.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, they don't just tell you about it, they actually show you.
Oh, right, they have that visualization.
Yeah, they have this graph, and you can literally see the seasonality jumping out at you. You see those peaks and valleys repeating year after year.
So it's like The data is telling a story.
Exactly. And SARIMA is helping us understand the language of that story.
That's awesome. I mean, being able to visualize those patterns, I bet that's incredibly helpful for businesses, right?
Absolutely. It helps them anticipate those busy periods, make sure they've got enough inventory.
Right, so you're not caught off guard.
Exactly. Or, on the flip side, they can use it to anticipate those slower periods.
So you can plan your marketing campaigns strategically, offer discounts maybe?
Exactly. It's all about making smarter decisions based on data.
Okay, so this Superstore example is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a great illustration.
But is that kind of the extent of it? Like, is SARIMA really only useful for analyzing sales data?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, sales data is a classic example, but the applications of SARIMA are way broader than that.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so think about, like, healthcare. Hospitals could use SARIMA to forecast patient admissions.
So they can anticipate how many beds they're going to need, how many doctors to schedule.
Exactly. Or you could use it in economics, like trying to predict inflation rates.
Oh, wow. So we could use SARIMA to, like, understand economic trends?
Absolutely. Or how about, like, predicting energy consumption?
Okay, so this is, like, way more powerful than I initially thought.
Oh, yeah. SARIMA is a versatile tool.
There's this one thing that keeps coming up,
What's that?
this whole stationary data thing.
Ah, yes. That's a big one.
Because it seems like in the real world, data is not always going to be so predictable.
Right. You're absolutely right. And that's where things can get a little tricky.
So what happens if our data isn't like that train on the tracks, all nice and predictable? What if it's more like, I don't know, a wild animal running all over the place?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Like, how do you tame the wild data?
Okay, so how do we do it? How do we get SARIMA to work even when the data is being a little difficult?
Well, remember that I in SARIMA, the integrated part, that's actually designed to help us with this problem.
Okay, so remind me again, what's integrated all about? It's been a while since we covered that.
Right, so it's all about making that data stationary, remember?
Right, like that train on the tracks.
Exactly. So one of the ways it does this is through this process called differencing.
Differencing, okay. What is that? It sounds like we're, like, subtracting stuff.
You're on the right track. Basically, instead of looking at the raw data points themselves, we look at the differences between them.
So, like, if our sales went from, say, 100 to 120 to 130.
We'd look at the increase as 20, then 10.
Okay, I'm seeing it.
And often, by focusing on those changes, we can actually start to see patterns that were hidden before.
So it's like we're smoothing out the bumps in the road.
Exactly. And that can make the data a lot easier for SARIMA to work with.
So even when the data is a little bit messy, there are ways to wrangle it into shape for SARIMA.
Absolutely. It's like you might need to use a few different tools.
Right, not just like one magic button.
Exactly. But that's part of what makes time series analysis so interesting.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle.
Exactly. It's like, how can we take this data,
Yeah,
which is messy and complicated, and make sense of it?
right, and then actually use it to make better decisions.
Exactly. And SARIMA is a really powerful tool to help us do that.
Okay, so let's say we've, like, tamed our wild data. We've got our SARIMA model all set up. We're feeling good. But how do we actually know if it's working? Like, how do we measure how accurate our predictions are?
Yeah, that's really important because a model is only as good as its predictions.
Exactly. So how do we evaluate how well our SARIMA model is actually doing?
So there are a few different ways to measure model accuracy. One common one is called mean absolute error, or MAE.
Okay, and what does that tell us?
Basically, it tells you, on average, how far off your predictions are from the actual values.
So if our MAE is small,
It means our model is making predictions that are pretty close to reality.
okay, that makes sense.
And there are other metrics too, like mean squared error, or MSE, which gives more weight to larger errors.
So if we have a choice, smaller error values are always better.
Exactly. It means our model is doing a good job of capturing the underlying patterns in the data.
This is all starting to make so much sense now.
Glad to hear it. But, there's one more thing we need to talk about.
What's that?
Even the best forecasting model,
Yeah.
even SARIMA with its fancy math and everything, can't predict everything.
Right, because the world is messy. Unexpected things happen.
Exactly. Like, who could have predicted the pandemic?
Right. It threw everything off.
Exactly. So no matter how good our model is, we always have to be aware that there are limitations.
So it's not enough to just, like, blindly trust the numbers.
Exactly. We have to use our judgment, our knowledge of the real world.
Right, like common sense.
Exactly. Combine that with what the data is telling us.
Okay, so it's like a partnership
Yeah.
between the data and our own human understanding of things.
Exactly. It's not one or the other, it's both.
I like that. So as we wrap things up here, I feel like we've covered so much ground. We've gone from like SARIMA being this big, scary acronym
Right, totally intimidating.
to actually understanding how it works, its strengths, its
And
limitations.
how to use it responsibly.
Exactly. But I also get the feeling that this is just like the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole universe of time series analysis out there.
Wow, it never ends.
It's the lifelong journey of discovery.
Well, on that note, any final thoughts
Mhm.
for our listeners out there who are ready to embark on their own time series adventures?
Just one thought to keep in mind. Remember how important stationary data is for SARIMA? Well, how would you actually go about testing for that?
Oh, good question.
It's something to think about as you start exploring the world of time series analysis.
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. I'm already thinking about it. So, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of SARIMA. It's been a wild ride.
And remember, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.
Until next time.